I'll pass over to you now.
Okay. So to quote Monty Python, I'll say now to something completely different. I'd like to thank the Football Collective for organizing this. This really has been a very interesting day. I've been following it since 4 a.m., so I hope that I provide a good finale to this day. And the topic of my research is the enduring love, the long-term effect of a new stadium on attendance at professional English Association football. This is a study, work in progress, co-authored with Professor Szymanski here at the University of Michigan. So just a brief introduction about this concept of the honeymoon effect, for those who might not have heard it. Generally, in the United States and North American sports, they've examined the association between attendance and the construction of new stadiums. And this is part of the ongoing predicament of public finance in North America of sport facilities used by private teams. And one of the arguments was that increased attendance includes increased economic activity, therefore it justifies some public incentives and costs. So the focus of this paper is establishing the statistically the size of the impact on attendance of new stadiums in English professional soccer. And the important thing to note is that in North America, there's no promotion relegation. It's a closed league system, whereas in England, we have the open league system with promotion relegation. And so the questions are, what are the actual incentives to invest in quality and then also long-term performance to sustain the increased attendance? So quick review of previous literature is, first of all, the honeymoon effect literature that was mostly conducted in North America that really exhibits the decline in the association between attendance and new stadiums as the years go by. Primarily by about 8 or 9 years, there's no longer statistical significance, suggesting that other factors are now in play that impact attendance. And while finance is generally based on 20 plus years of bond sales, for instance, attendance should not be used as a justification for public finance. So going back to England now, the really interesting thing is that England, of course, is also very different in the United States and Canada, for instance, is that a lot of the grounds in England were fairly antiquated, actually, as of 1988, for instance, and we really look at the historical development of stadiums. And, there were modest TV revenues before the 1990s. 1980s, there were several clubs that were actually insolvent. 1989, there was the Hillsborough disaster that really shaped football grounds in England after that. And what we do notice is this renaissance since the 1990s that includes the substantial increase in broadcast revenues and an increased aggregate of attendance. And just to show you a quick overview of these changes in attendance and capacity, so if we look back between 1974 and 2016, we see the decline in attendance up to 1990 and then an increase in attendance. And this might go back to also what was mentioned in the keynote speak about English football and the development of English football and hooliganism and violence. But what we also do notice is the decrease in the capacity by tiers as well. And the tiers I call are the divisions. And what is also noticeable is how the capacities have generally gone down. They have started going up again towards this period, but we can definitely see the impact of the Taylor report and the changes in stadiums. But what has really increased is the capacity utilization since the 1990s, which we see is not actually far from 100% in the case of the Premier League. So the data that we collected, this goes back to 1990, and we observe about 32 clubs that have built new stadiums. This is a long list of them, I won't go through it. But we're looking at the likes of Manchester City, Sunderland, Middlesbrough, Stoke City, and several others. Should also mention Bolton, of course, which is interesting since their recent endeavors. In terms of the data collected, we have attendance data per match going back to 1990. So we have a total of 54,940 matches that we observed. The interesting thing, there is one match that was abandoned, actually, which is why, in terms of attendance, we only have 54,939 observations. We then break it down also, we have the divisions, or as we call them, the tiers. We also break it to matchups, so that's matchups between two clubs, home and away. We have a predicted result variable. We also have a surprise component, which is based on the expected result versus what actually the result was. Promotion, relegation, and participating in European competition, if the match was played on a weekend or a holiday. And we also collected the wages of clubs from the financial statements using the annual financial statements from clubs that are available online. And then what we also have in terms of the stadium, we have the capacity of the stadium for every match and also the year it was built. And the model is essentially is examining the log attendance per match using these variables. So when I mentioned the matchups, these are just 4 examples of, for instance, matchups. So this is attendance in Liverpool and Manchester United matches, and then vice versa. And we see the increase in attendance in the home games for Manchester United against Liverpool. That's also related to the expansion of the stadium. Liverpool and Everton was pretty straightforward. If we then look at Manchester City, for instance, in the case of Arsenal and Chelsea, then we have what we can sort of identify some kind of impact of the new stadium and the increased capacity of the new stadiums. What we also created was something called an attendance index, and that is to take each one of these clubs with new stadiums that we're calling them the treated clubs in our difference in difference models, and we try and compare those to the, we compare those to the attendance in control groups. And what these graphs generally show is the changes in this attendance index, and it also examines the division the clubs are in and how that affects. So if you look at the top corner, for instance, you'll see the case of Arsenal, and you can see that bump in attendance, but the division will stay as a straight line because they were in the Premier League throughout that period. And I can share later with anyone who's interested to follow the other indexes, etc., that we can examine there. But if you look, for instance, also at Wigan or Swansea, you can see these changes in the index factors. So going on to the results of the regressions. Generally speaking, these are just the basic results, and this shows the impact of the association of log wages and attendance that is positive. Weekend bank holidays are positively related. The surprise coefficient that's positively related. Promotion, relegation, etc. But the more important results are the ones that actually examine the age of the stadium and increased attendance from the association. And what we're actually looking at is the longer term, the longer duration of this relationship as opposed to North American studies. And what you see in this graph is the actual coefficients and the confidence intervals. You can really identify the change between the period before the new stadiums were built and afterwards, and also how the long-term effect of that up to 20 years in this case. In order to test our results, we also ran a placebo model. So that was, we ran 100 iterations in the model with placebo. So that means each time we gave a different set of clubs new stadiums randomly to test if the results are still the same. The null hypothesis being that they shouldn't be. So essentially what we identify is that they are the same. What we identify, we reject this to suggest that when we run the placebo models, the same results are no longer apparent. So to show evidence that it is the case of the new clubs and not less so the general trend. So going back then to the comparison with North American studies, one of the arguments is also to suggest that comparing the open league and the closed league structure is also examining performance. And what we also identify is that if we look at ranks of clubs in England, where 1 is the top of the Premier League going downwards, so it's essentially a reverse image of going up or down in ranks. And the clubs with new stadiums generally went up in ranks. And there were some cases of relegation, but there are also several cases of promotion since building these new stadiums. But on average, they have gone up in their ranks. Whereas if you look in the North American studies, there's more of a sort of zigzag up direction here. And that suggests that performance, in this case, win percentage, is not as consistent in teams that have played in new stadiums. So there isn't a general trend that we can identify in terms of performance for teams playing in new stadiums. So going on to the conclusion then, first of all, we do find is the longer statistical relationship between the age of a new facility and attendance in the UK. Now, we also find that there is some kind of difference between the closed league model, which is the monopolized leagues in North America, where you have to enter through expansion. There's no promotion relegation, as opposed to the system in English soccer, which is with promotion and relegation. There's obviously some caution required here because there are many other differences between English football and the American sports. But to sort of close that gap, then what we do suggest is also the future research to follow up on studies that are already done in German soccer, and also studies, for instance, in France, Italy, and Spain, that also have promotion relegation. And this can establish whether the new stadium effects are also more enduring in the context of soccer leagues in general, and if this can also be attributed to the systems of promotion and relegation. And again, thank you very much for everyone and for all the people listening in. And I hope you enjoyed this. And I look forward to continuing conversations with people online here. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. That was